America to lead the world in 5G, just as we led the world in 4G. That, of course, takes private sector initiative, but also requires government to set the stage in terms of getting the tools for the industry to use out there into the marketplace.
So what are you going to learn in the meeting today, when Verizon and T-Mo and AT&T are in the room? What is the interchange going to be about? And potentially, what are you going to find out that will enable you to just do what you just said you've set out to do?
Well, first, we want to outline a cross-government strategy. Not just the FCC, but the entire administration is going to be on the same page in terms of asserting U.S. leadership in 5G. What we hope to learn from the industry is what are some of the necessary building blocks for 5G. We want America to be the home for innovation and investment for the next generation of wireless connectivity. We need to know what some of the policies are needed in order to promote U.S. leadership. And I'm hopeful it'll be a very productive exchange.
Yeah, I've spent some time talking about it and reporting on it. It is going to be a significant change. You obviously know that. One of the key questions, though, is when. When is it really going to be something in terms of powering the Internet of Things, in terms of obviously what it means for the home and consumers? When do you think it will be actually something we're talking about on a daily basis and something we're embracing on a daily basis?
Well, I think there's a strong case for optimism about it being sooner. We already see some of the nation's biggest companies doing 5G trials in cities like Indianapolis. We see a lot of investment and innovation in some of the tech sector. But there's also reason to be concerned because we see a lot of the regulatory barriers to 5G deployment in terms of the infrastructure that is needed to get out there into the marketplace. Just these regulations are holding back the case for a 5G deployment. And so that's part of the reason why the FCC has been focused on what I call our 5G fast plan, facilitating America's superiority in 5G technology. If we get the spectrum out there, incentivize infrastructure deployment, and modernize our regulations, I'm confident that we can hasten the day when Americans can turn to 5G just as they've come to rely on 4G.
Much of what you're discussing here is, interestingly, part of the argument made by T-Mobile and Sprint as to why they should be allowed to get together. Namely, that they together will be able to spend the money and the resources to bring them and bring us as a country up to where we should be in terms of 5G. Do you agree with that argument?
Well, that's one of the arguments that we are evaluating in the context of that transaction. I can't comment on the particular transaction, but what I can say is that, again, we want America to lead in 5G, and we want to set the table so that every company, big and small, regardless of where they happen to be trying to deploy these 5G services, will be able to do so at scale in order to serve American consumers.
Let me bring Jim Cramer in from the West Coast for a question.
Great to see you, Mr. Chairman.
You too.
I want to follow up on what David said. I mean, John Lesher has told me, look, if we don't allow this combination, T-Mobile Sprint, we are going to be left behind in 5G. But if we do allow it, then we will burst ahead. Given the fact that there are so many companies that want to be in telco, do you think that antitrust should consider 5G when they make their decision about whether to allow this deal to go forward?
Well, again, I can't comment on the FCC's consideration of that particular transaction. Whether the Antitrust Division at Justice decides to evaluate that is, of course, up to the Justice Department. But I'm hopeful going forward that we can take a holistic view of the marketplace and, again, set the table in terms of a market-based, forward-thinking regulatory approach that allows companies, any company across the United States, to be able to invest in 5G technology and build a strong business case for 5G going forward.
Does the trade war slow down your efforts, Mr. Chairman, to bring 5G here? I mean, I'm just wondering how much of that network equipment has to be imported at now a 25% higher rate into this country.
I don't believe so. By far the biggest barrier is the domestic regulatory barriers that we face. For example, it takes 1 to 2 hours to install a small cell on a utility pole that's necessary for 5G. In some cases, it can take a year or 2 years to get the regulatory approval for deploying that small cell. That by far is, I think, one of the greatest barriers to getting the wide-scale deployment of 5G technologies in the future. Additionally, the spectrum that is necessary to get out into the marketplace, we've been working aggressively to do that, and we've already teed up over the next year or so more spectrum for the commercial sector to use than all of the mobile broadband providers today hold combined. And so I think those building blocks domestically are much more important for 5G in order to be deployed at scale.
Why are we so concerned about China